So now Russian President Vladimir Putin has sacked his long-standing ally Sergei Shoigu as defense minister. This, of course, has been announced by the Kremlin. Shoigu will be replaced by former First Deputy Minister Andrei Belousov, who is an economist by trade. He doesn't have a military background.
He doesn't have a military background, but, this shuffle up is happening, and so we're joined now by Sergei Erofeev, sociologist and international educator at Rutgers University. Hello, and thanks for joining us today on TVP World.
Hello, Alex. Hi, Don.
Hi.
Good afternoon. So if I may, I'll ask the first question. So why now? Why has Putin made these changes now at this moment?
Well, there are two factors here. One is that the war is actually firmly established as a protracted war. And I agree with the previous speaker that the war of attrition is some kind of acknowledgement that comes from the Kremlin and Putin in particular. So he does need an economist to manage this war. Moreover, there has been no minister of defense, and Belousov is not going to be a minister of defense who actually conducts the war. There is only one minister of defense, and especially since the war broke out, that's Mr. Putin himself. We know perfectly well that Mr. Shoigu was a zero-talent military guy. Mr. Belousov is not a military guy at all, but it doesn't matter. So number one is that the country and its leadership has entered now the fully realized protracted war of attrition. And number two, which is no less important, is the consequences of the presidential elections, which are considered by many leaders of the world as illegitimate. So there's a very drastic drop in Putin's legitimacy now. And he needs to do something because the things at the front line are not going very well for him, despite we hear about some minor advances of the Russian army. So the things are not well both at home and at the front line. What is wrong at home? One thing about Mr. Shoigu is that he has been an extremely loyal Putin's man, but at the same time, he has his own roots of legitimacy. The only other person in the top Russian leadership who at all has some legitimacy, the other person is Putin himself. So Mr. Shoigu actually helped to bring Putin to power because he had already some popularity in the 1990s among many Russian people. So at the moment, if it seems that there is some success at the battlefield, then Mr. Shoigu's legitimacy will at least stay the same, whereas Putin's legitimacy has dropped very significantly after the elections. So he needs to maintain that balance and not to allow anyone, in fact, there's only Shoigu, who can at least claim some legitimacy. So he needs to remove him from the area where Putin's own legitimacy can be diminished further. But Shoigu is extremely important for Putin. He's a member of his inner circle. He's a member of the mafia core, unlike Belousov. Belousov is a very important advisor, but he's not a mafia core. So Putin can sacrifice Belousov in case that things go really wrong on the battlefield. He cannot sacrifice Shoigu because he's part of that inner core of the mafia gang which rules the country. It's very important for him. And indirectly, this tells us that Putin is actually preparing for a defeat in Ukraine. On the one hand, he wants to protract the war as long as possible because for as long as the war drags on, Putin is safer fighting off all the internal dissent and suppress any political activity in the country because he has that major excuse for that. But at the same time, I think Putin is not doing very well, and he's thinking about what happens if he's defeated in Ukraine.
Right. So that's an interesting theory. So setting up a fall guy just in case things go bad or wrong. But what happens in the meantime to Shoigu? What will he be doing now? Will he still be involved in the ministry, or will he take a different position?
No, we can be pretty certain that Mr. Shoigu will not be involved in the military dealings at all. He has been very little involved so far. We know that he could only make impressions. He's very good in what is Putin doing, making impression, managing the impression for the rest of the world. The Russian expression is to puff your cheeks. So he's just making good faces during a bad game. That's Mr. Shoigu's talent. He has been extremely good in PR all the way from the 1990s. Now, taking the position of the secretary of Russia's Security Council is extremely important to save Shoigu from any shame, any downfall, and keep him as a very important member of the mafia core. Shoigu probably will face some problems in his new position because the position was practically developed for even closer ally of Mr. Putin. And that's Nikolai Patrushev, who used to be Putin's successor as the head of FSB, Federal Security Service. And later, he became the secretary of the Security Council, which has been growing in its importance. And practically the country now is governed not by the Council of Ministers, not by the presidential administration, but by this very Security Council. These are the core mafia people who can rule the country the way they want. And the instrument, the main instrument to implement their desires is, of course, FSB, which used to be directed by Mr. Patrushev. So this is the major intrigue today. What will happen to Mr. Patrushev? I suspect he will stay a very, very important person. Maybe some new position will be invented for him. But his previous position, the secretary of the Security Council, is now going to Mr. Shoigu, who is a very long friend of Putin. They go to Taiga together, so they display all signs of friendship, very intimate friendship, I would say, the most intimate friendship displayed publicly for the Russian television viewers. So Mr. Shoigu is going to probably just do the same as he's done always, being a very important PR figure. I don't expect that he will govern certain mechanisms which proceed from the Security Council to FSB and somewhere else. He has no background in secret services. He was a typical bandit of the 1990s and not a military man at all, and not even a secret service officer. So let's see what happens. It's just trying to save the face of Mr. Shoigu on the one hand, and on the other hand, to reduce the disbalance between Putin's new diminished legitimacy and the remainder of the legitimacy of Mr. Shoigu.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your insight here on TVP World. We're going to have to wait, of course, and see how that continues to play out. Mr. Sergei Erofeev, I'm sorry about that. Thank you for the help. Sociologist from Rutgers University. Thank you very much once again for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.